Long after the lamps have been lowered in a quiet room, there is still a place where the old Greek stories seem to keep their gentle light. It is not always a loud place. Sometimes it is only a coastline at dusk, a white wall warmed by the last of the day, or a small carved figure on a shelf, standing very still beside a bowl of fruit. The myths of ancient Greece often arrive this way, not as thunder, but as a soft remembering. They are old stories about gods and heroes, yes, but they are also stories about seas, mountains, harvests, storms, family quarrels, lost roads, and the strange feeling that the world is full of names older than memory. And as you settle in, it may be pleasant simply to let those names drift by one, like small boats on calm water. Ancient Greek mythology is not one single tale, and it was never arranged into one neat book at the beginning. It lived in pieces. It lived in songs, in spoken stories, in prayers, in local traditions, and in the patient work of poets. One town might tell a god's story slightly differently from another town. One island might remember a hero in one way, while a village farther inland would speak of the same figure with another detail, another parent, another ending. This is part of what makes the old Greek world feel so human. It was never perfectly fixed. It was remembered the way people remember family stories, with affection, with small changes, with a few details brightened by time. And perhaps that is one reason these tales still feel alive. They were always being held gently in many minds at once. The gods themselves are often imagined as distant and shining, yet in the older stories they are also surprisingly close. They walk on hills, they listen near wells, they sit at feasts, they argue, they send dreams. They take on the moods of the world around them, the blue of the sea, the dust of roads, the warm pressure of summer. Zeus, who ruled the sky, was not only a symbol of power, but also of weather, of order, of the great overhead brightness that could suddenly become a storm. Hera, so often remembered for dignity and jealousy, also carried the feeling of marriage, household order, and queenly presence. Poseidon was not simply the god of the sea, but the restless motion of water itself, the deep force that could soothe or unsettle a coast. Even before we know every story attached to them, their names already seem to hold a kind of landscape. And then there is Athena, calm and watchful, associated with wisdom, craft, and practical intelligence. She is often remembered in shining armor, but she also belongs to weaving, careful making, and the kind of thought that steadies the hands. In the old stories, she is not only a fierce protector, but also a patient one. Her sacred city was Athens, and in the city's own imagination, she remained present in its stones, its olive trees, its civic life, and its arts. The olive tree, that modest and enduring gift, was never only an emblem. It was a useful, living thing. It gave oil. It gave shade. It stood through dry seasons. So a myth could settle around it easily, as if the earth itself had offered the story a place to rest. Some Greek myths were grand and wide, and some were small enough to fit into a household. A hearth could be sacred. A doorway could be watched by a god. A spring in the hills could have a name. Ancient people did not divide the world into purely sacred and purely ordinary places as sharply as modern life sometimes does. A sacred feeling might gather around bread, around fire, around a child's name, around a road crossing. It is easy to imagine this in the evening, when a room becomes quieter and the ordinary things around us seem almost ceremonial in their stillness. A cup, a curtain, a lamp, a folded garment, all of them can begin to look like they are holding a little more meaning than before. The Olympian gods, who later became the best known, were only part of a much larger world. Beneath them were older powers, earth figures, sea figures, sky figures, and countless local spirits and divine presences. The Greeks inherited and reshaped older ideas from many directions. They lived among neighboring cultures, traded with them, argued with them, borrowed from them, and told and retold stories across borders that were never fully closed. So when we speak of ancient Greek mythology, we are also speaking about a world in motion. Ideas moved like ships, images moved like songs. A goddess of fertility, a storm god, a heroic traveler, all of them could change shape a little as they crossed a sea or passed from one dialect to another. And because the stories were shared aloud, they often carried the natural rhythms of speech. A poet might begin with a question, or with an appeal to the muse, those elusive figures of inspiration who helped memory and artistry join together. The muses are wonderful to linger on for a moment, because they belong to the act of remembering itself. They are not only characters in a story, they are a way of saying that song, poetry, and history all need help to survive. They stand near springs and mountains, near places where thought can wander freely. In a quiet room with the day behind us, it is easy to understand why ancient storytellers felt that inspiration was something gently received rather than forced. A story arrives. A melody arrives. A line of verse settles down like dust in sunlight. One of the most famous Greek stories is the tale of Persephone, who is taken into the underworld and later returns. It is a story often connected with the turning of the seasons, with the sleeping and waking of the earth. But it is also a story of separation, of a mother's grief, of the changeable bond between life above and life below. Demeter, Persephone's mother, is the goddess of grain and harvest. When Persephone is gone, the earth becomes barren. When she returns, growth comes back. This is a myth that speaks in the language of crops and weather, but also in the language of the human heart. Anyone who has waited for spring or watched a garden recover after cold months can feel the quiet power of this old cycle. It is one of those stories that does not need to shout. It keeps working in the background, like roots under soil. The underworld in Greek myth was not always a place of flames and punishment. It was often more like a shadowed continuation of existence, a realm of remembered names, rivers, gates, and figures who stand at thresholds. Hades, the god associated with this realm, was not exactly a villain in the oldest sense. He ruled a necessary domain. The dead had a place. The living had a place. And the boundary between them, while solemn, was part of the order of things. Ancient people thought often about this boundary, perhaps more than modern life encourages us to. They visited tombs. They made offerings. They told stories to soften what could not be softened. A myth about the underworld may therefore feel severe at first, yet it often carries a strange comfort. It says that the unseen world has shape. It says that memory matters. It says that names may continue even when voices go quiet. Then there are the heroes who move through the myths like travelers through weather. Heracles, perhaps the best known, is remembered for strength and labor, for tasks so difficult they seem impossible at first glance. But he is also a figure of endurance, of being tested again and again, of carrying burdens that are not only physical. His stories are not always graceful. They can be heavy, troubled, and strange. Yet they persist because they understand something simple about human life. That effort itself can become legendary when it is repeated long enough. Odysseus, by contrast, travels by wit, by patience, by adaptability. His journey home is full of delays, islands, encounters, and moments where the mind must stay alert in order to survive. If Heracles represents strength under strain, Odysseus represents intelligence under drift. Both are deeply human, even when they stand beside gods. There is a particular tenderness in the Greek habit of making heroes vulnerable. They are never completely above the world. Achilles, so often spoken of as almost invincible, still has a body, a grief, a loyalty, a limit. His great story is not only about war, but about friendship, anger, honor, and the way time moves toward loss. Helen, too, is more than a name in a war story. She's a figure around whom beauty, blame, desire, and blame again gather in layers. Ancient myths do not always simplify the people inside them. They let characters remain complicated. This may be part of their long survival. Human beings are rarely one thing for long. We are often brave and confused, tender and stubborn, proud and frightened, all in the same day. The old Greek epics, especially the Iliad and the Odyssey, are among the great shelves upon which these stories rest. They were attributed to Homer, a name that may represent a person, a tradition, or a revered memory of poetry itself. Scholars have thought about Homer for centuries, wondering how much came from one voice and how much from many. That question alone feels fitting, because the epics are built from layers. They sound as though they have been polished by time, the way sea glass is polished by waves. A repeated phrase, a familiar name, a familiar ship, a famous dawn, all of these create a rhythm that helps the listener breathe with the story instead of racing ahead of it. In an age before books became common, repeated language was not a flaw. It was part of the architecture. It gave memory a place to hold on. The gods often behave like a family, which in some ways they are. They quarrel, they choose sides, they intervene in human affairs, and they show favoritism with remarkable ease. This can make the myths feel oddly domestic. A divine council may sound a little like a difficult household gathering, only larger, brighter, and more dangerous. There is a great deal of temper in Olympus. There is also a great deal of humor. Some stories have a sly, almost playful quality, especially when gods are outwitted by clever mortals or embarrassed by their own vanity. These details remind us that the Greek imagination was not solemn all the time. It enjoyed irony. It enjoyed reversals. It enjoyed watching power become awkward for a moment. In the evening, it can be soothing to think of a world where even the mighty are not entirely comfortable in their own grandeur. One of the loveliest qualities of Greek myth is how often it is tied to places that still exist in some form. Mount Olympus remains a mountain. Delos remains an island. Delphi was a real sanctuary nestled into a mountainside. Knossos, on Crete, preserves the memory of a palace that later imagination connected with the Minotaur and the labyrinth. These are not just imaginary backdrops. They are landscapes where human beings really walked, really built, really asked questions of the gods. To stand among ruins, even in the mind, is to feel time layered rather than erased. A broken column still hints at its former height. A worn stone stair still remembers feet. A weathered wall can hold the warmth of a sun from long ago, as if time were not a straight road, but a series of rooms opening into one another. Delphi especially has a quiet power in the imagination. It was once thought to be a center of the world, marked by the navel stone, the omphalos. People traveled there for guidance from Apollo's oracle. The answers given there were often cryptic, which feels very human and very ancient at once. People seek certainty, and the world gives symbolism. They ask for direct paths and receive a sentence that must be interpreted. But perhaps that, too, was part of the wisdom. Life is rarely handed over in plain language. We understand it through hints, through patterns, through things half seen. The temple at Delphi would have been part of a broader atmosphere of mountain air, sacred smoking offerings, human expectation, and the hush that comes over people when they believe they are standing near something larger than themselves. Apollo himself is a good figure to linger with because he holds many things together. He is associated with light, prophecy, music, healing, and order. His presence is often clean and bright, but not cold in every story. He can be severe, yet he also belongs to the arts of measured form. A lyre in his hands suggests that harmony can be a kind of power. Music in the Greek world was not decoration. It was woven into festivals, poetry, worship, and memory. A song could preserve a name. A rhythm could carry a story across generations. Even now, if we hear a tune repeated at the right pace, some part of us feels steadied. The Greeks understood this long ago. Sound could shape feeling. Rhythm could guide the mind. Story could become a place to rest. Artemis, Apollo's sister, offers another kind of calm. She belongs to the moon, to wilderness, to the edges of civilization, to animals, to young women, and to the quiet dignity of independence. Her sacred spaces often feel cool and wooded, not crowded. If Apollo's world has the polished brightness of ordered daylight, Artemis's world has the hush of paths under leaves. She is often imagined with a bow, but in a bedtime mood, it may be gentler to think of her as a guardian of thresholds, a watcher at the edge of the forest, a presence that notices without needing to interrupt. The Greeks had room in their imagination for many kinds of power, including the power of restraint. Ares, by contrast, is the hard face of conflict. He represents the violence of battle, the human impulse towards struggle, the noise and confusion that settle over armies. Yet even Ares is not simply a flat symbol. Myth gives him relationships, frustrations, and a place among the gods. The Greeks knew war well, perhaps too well, and they did not romanticize it without complication. Sometimes the myths make war look glorious for a moment, then quickly reveal its cost. That pattern is one of the oldest in literature. A shining shield can also reflect sorrow. A hero can be admired and mourned in the same breath. A battlefield can be full of honor and ruin at once. Ancient stories learned how to hold those two truths together, and that is part of why they still resonate softly in the mind. Afternoons in the ancient Greek world must have had their own ordinary music, pots being filled, bread being baked, goats moving on hillsides, children running in narrow streets, traders calling out in markets, sailors inspecting ropes, oil poured into lamps at dusk. We sometimes imagine mythology only in temples and palaces, yet myth lived alongside these daily acts. A woman weaving might think of Athena. A sailor might offer prayer to Poseidon before a voyage. A mother might ask for protection for a child. A farmer might watch the sky and remember Demeter. The sacred entered life not only through ceremony, but through habit, through repetition, through small acts of attention. This makes the myths feel even more intimate. They were not distant entertainment. They were companions in the fabric of the day. And because the Greeks loved genealogy, family trees grew long and twisted through the stories. Gods had children. Heroes had divine parents. Mortal kings claimed noble descent. Cities invented ancestors to explain their place in the world. Genealogy in myth is less about neat record keeping and more about connection. It says that no one stands alone. A person is related to a river, a mountain, a god, a former king, a faraway island, a lost love, a famous failure. Even when these connections are impossible in a literal sense, they create meaning. They give a family or a city a sense of belonging to an older pattern. In a quiet hour, this can feel strangely comforting. We too are formed by things older than ourselves, by places, stories, and inherited rhythms we did not choose but still carry. Among the many strange and beautiful beings in Greek myth are the nymphs, those gentle spirits of waters, trees, groves, and mountains. They are not usually central rulers. They are more like presences that belong to a place so completely that the place and the figure become difficult to separate. A spring may have a nymph. A tree may hold one. A cave may be regarded as inhabited by a presence that is both local and divine. The nymphs help make the natural world feel inhabited, not empty. They suggest that a stream is not just water moving downhill, but a stream with a personality, a memory, a quiet awareness. When we sit near water in the dark, or listen to wind in branches, it is not hard to understand why ancient people felt this way. The world seems more alive when one listens closely enough. Satyrs and Silene belong to a different tone, one more rustic and unruly, often associated with Dionysus, the god of wine, theater, ecstasy, and transformation. Dionysus is among the most fascinating of Greek gods because he contains celebration and disturbance together. He is linked to vines and harvest, but also to altered states, masked performances, and the dissolving of ordinary boundaries. Theater itself is deeply tied to him. The Greek stage, with its masks and chorus, was not merely entertainment. It was a place where a city could think about suffering, fate, justice, and desire in public. And yet Dionysus also reminds us that human life includes festivals, music, and the relief of laughter. There are times when structure matters, and times when release matters, and the old stories seem wise enough to know both. The Greek theater is one of those inventions that feels almost like a gift left on the path. Tragedies by Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides opened familiar myths in new ways, adding psychological depth, political reflection, and a sense of unease about certainty. These plays did not merely repeat old tales. They asked what the tales meant and what kind of people were living inside them. In this way, mythology became an ongoing conversation. A story about Oedipus, for example, is not only about fate. It is also about searching, recognition, blindness, and the painful consequences of knowing too late. The quiet force of these plays is in how they leave space for the listener to wonder. They never feel hurried when they are allowed to unfold at their own pace. Oedipus himself is remembered through one of the most famous puzzles in literature, but the mood around his story is more sorrowful than sensational. There is a solemn dignity in the way Greek tragedy looks at human limitation. People make choices. People misunderstand. People inherit consequences they did not create. And yet the plays do not simply condemn. They observe. They ask how much we can know and what it costs to know it. This same question appears again and again in Greek myth. Knowledge is powerful but not free. Prophecy is real but not easy. The future leaves traces but never in a straightforward path. A calm listener may find something gentle in this uncertainty. Not every question must be solved tonight. Some are meant only to be sat with quietly. The sea in Greek story is almost always near. Greece itself is a land of islands, peninsulas, inlets, and crossing points. Water shapes the imagination there. The sea can be a road, a barrier, a grave, a route home, a place of monsters, a place of trade, a place of salt wind and clean horizons. This maritime life helped make Greek myth especially fluid. Ships carry people away. Ships bring stories back. Odysseus, Jason, Menelaus, Aeneas in later traditions, all are travelers shaped by water. A voyage creates a space where the ordinary order of life can shift. On the open sea, direction matters, weather matters, crew matters. Courage matters, but so does patience. Perhaps this is why so many myths place revelations near shorelines, on rocks, and in harbors. The edge of land seems to invite thought about boundaries in general. Jason's story, with the Argonauts and the quest for the Golden Fleece, has a wandering quality that feels almost like a chain of campfires. Different companions, different lands, different encounters. The fleece itself is a curious object, glamorous and symbolic, as if the quest is about more than the thing sought. Like many Greek tales, it combines danger with ceremonial purpose. There are women who know herbs, kings who are suspicious, brothers who betray, and landscapes that resist passage. Medea, one of the most memorable figures in the story, is complex and unsettling, a woman of intelligence and power whose fate has been interpreted in many ways. Greek myth rarely leaves people simple for long. They are made of action, reaction, love, revenge, skill, and sorrow, all braided together in one long thread. The labyrinth, often linked with the Minotaur and with Crete, is one of the most enduring images from the Greek world. It is both architectural and psychological, a place of corridors, false turns, hidden centers, and uncertain escape. Even now, a labyrinth speaks to the feeling of being inside a problem that cannot be solved by straight motion. Yet it is also a place of design. Someone built it, or imagined it, or needed to believe it existed. That means human ingenuity stands behind the confusion. There is something almost peaceful in that thought. Even our most tangled experiences are shaped by patterns, by hands, by intention, by history. The labyrinth is not only a trap, it is also a made thing, and made things can be understood slowly. Minos, Daedalus, Ariadne, the Minotaur, each of these names carries a different emotional texture. Daedalus, the craftsman, suggests invention and skill, the human urge to make useful or beautiful things. Ariadne offers help, thread, guidance, and then a very human story of abandonment and transformation. The Minotaur itself is a creature of mixed nature, human and bull, a monster born of a broken order. Greek myths often turn difficult feelings into beings, places, and objects. A shame becomes a monster. A clever plan becomes a thread. A longing becomes a voyage. This is perhaps one of the oldest comforts of storytelling, that inner turmoil can be given shape outside the self, where it can be observed without being overwhelmed. There are also lesser-known gods and figures who give the mythic world its broad, textured edge. Hestia, for example, goddess of the hearth, is quiet and central in a way that modern readers sometimes overlook. She does not travel as much as the other gods. She stays near fire, home, and the stillness of domestic life. Yet in many ways she is foundational. The hearth is where food is prepared and shared. It is where family gathers. It is where warmth persists through darkness. Hestia's presence reminds us that not all sacred power is dramatic. Some of it is patient, steady, and almost invisible. In a sleepy room, with a lamp glowing or a window darkened, Hestia's kind of presence is easy to imagine. Hermes is another figure who moves with remarkable ease between worlds. Messenger of the gods, guide of travelers, patron of roads, trade, and transitions, he belongs to motion. He is also a trickster, which makes him feel delightfully human. He crosses boundaries and the stories follow him. In some tales, he invents the lyre from a tortoise shell, a detail that feels both playful and precise. A shell, a string, a song, all becoming music. Greek myth often delights in these moments when ordinary materials become enchanted through use and imagination. A simple object can become the beginning of art. A road can become a line of fate. A message can change a kingdom. Hermes seems to understand that movement itself is a kind of intelligence. There are also the Fates, or Moirae, who spin, measure, and cut the thread of life. They are among the most quietly powerful figures in Greek thought. They are not flashy. They do not need the sky or the sea. Their work is smaller and more absolute. A thread, a measure, a cut. This image has lasted for a reason. It captures something deep about how fragile and patterned life feels. We begin, we continue, we end. The pace is not ours alone, and yet the image is not cruel in a simplistic way. It is orderly. It suggests that life has a shape, however modest, and that every life is held within a larger fabric. For a listener drifting towards sleep, this can be a reassuring thought, a reminder that rest belongs to the pattern too. The Greek myths were not separate from the material world. Pottery painted with scenes of gods and heroes carried these stories into dining rooms, sanctuaries, and tombs. Vases decorated with black figure and red figure scenes preserved moments of recognition, struggle, and celebration. A wine bowl might show Dionysus. A jar might show a battle. A funeral vessel might show mourning. These images were part of everyday life, not hidden in special rooms alone. People drank, washed, stored, and offered things with mythology around them. It is a quiet thought that so much of what survives from the ancient world survives in fragments of such practical objects. A broken pot can hold a picture longer than a palace can hold a roof. In some places, local heroes became almost household presences. A city might honor its founder, its protector, or a legendary traveler who once passed through. Hero cults tied memory to place in a very intimate way. This means that a story was not only something told, it was something maintained. A tomb might be visited, a shrine might receive gifts, a festival might repeat the same pattern each year. Such repetition gave the ancient world a rhythm that matched seasons and tasks. Winter, spring, harvest, remembrance, celebration. It all moved in cycles. The myths did not float above daily life. They sank into it the way fragrance settles into cloth. One can spend a long time with the Trojan War, and perhaps the stories deserve that. It is one of the great collective dramas of the Greek imagination, a war caused by desire, honor, insult, alliance, and the old weakness of human pride. But even this vast conflict is remembered through intimate moments. A mother watching a son leave, a wife waiting at home, a warrior putting on armor, a friend standing nearby in silence. The heroes of Troy are rarely just warriors. They are sons, fathers, brothers, lovers, mourners. The Iliad gives space to grief as well as combat. That is part of its enduring power. It recognizes that even when people move through public catastrophe, the private heart continues to beat, slowly, painfully, and in need of tenderness. Hector, for many readers, is one of the most sympathetic figures in the epic tradition. He is protective, honorable, and aware of what war will take from his family and city. His farewell to Andromache is one of those scenes that lingers softly after the book is closed. Not because it is shocking, but because it is so quietly human. A child reaches toward a helmet and is frightened by the plume. The father removes the helmet and smiles. It is an image of tenderness inside a world of violence. Greek myth and epic often do this. They place a gentle detail in the middle of grandeur, and the detail becomes unforgettable. A hand on a shoulder, a cup of water, a moment of recognition. The small things stay with us. Another reason these stories remain restful to revisit is that they are so full of objects. Shields, spears, lyres, wreaths, goblets, sandals, threads, olive branches, doors, chariots, bowls, rings, oars. Objects in Greek myth are never merely props. They often carry destiny, identity, or ritual significance. Achilles' shield, for instance, becomes a whole imagined world in miniature, forged with scenes of city life, farming, dance, and war. That shield contains the world that the hero cannot fully protect. It is an astonishing image, and a peaceful one in its way. The world is represented on the surface of a round metal object, as though human civilization could be seen resting in the palm of a hand. The old stories also preserve many shapeshifters and boundary crossers. Proteus changes form. Tiresias moves between genders in different mythic contexts and is granted special sight. The centaurs, half human and half horse, live at the edge of civilized and wild. The sirens sing from dangerous places. Each of these figures seems to ask the same soft question in a different form. What happens where categories meet? What happens when form is not stable? Ancient Greek imagination did not fear such places entirely. It often treated them as sources of insight. The world is not always cleanly divided. Human beings are not entirely one thing. Knowledge may arrive in disguise. A lesson may come in the form of a song. The sirens, of course, are often linked with Odysseus, and the famous scene in which he is tied to the mast while the crew's ears are blocked with wax remains one of the most memorable in literature. It is an image of restraint, listening, and survival. He wants to hear the song and live through it. That desire is very human. Some things are dangerous because they are beautiful. Some beauty can only be approached with caution. This is not only a mythic lesson, it is an everyday one. We all know the pull of things that are lovely and unwise. The Greek stories simply make that pull visible, personified, and musical. Cassandra is another figure who rewards quiet attention. Gifted with prophecy and yet not believed, she stands as a lasting image of insight without recognition. Her story has a cold, soft ache to it. To know and not be heard is a deeply human sorrow. In myth, it becomes even sharper. The Greeks were attentive to the instability of speech, trust, and public judgment. Cassandra's fate reminds us that truth is not only about being correct, it is also about whether anyone is able to receive what is said. In a whispering room at night, this may feel especially poignant. So much depends on listening, so much passes unheard. The ancient Greek world was full of festivals, and festivals gave form to shared feeling. Processions, songs, offerings, competitions, and communal feasting all helped bind a city together. Some festivals were tied to Dionysus, some to Athena, some to local traditions we now know only in part. These occasions were not rare interruptions. They were part of how civic life understood itself. A festival could honor the gods, but it also allowed the city to rehearse its own identity. People walked together, they sang together, they remembered together. The rhythm of a shared event can be calming even in imagination. There is something restorative in the idea of a community moving at the same pace, under the same sky, carrying the same wreaths, listening to the same music. And yet the Greek world was not one place, but many. Athens was not Sparta. Corinth was not Thebes. The islands had their own flavor, the coast its own mercantile energy, the inland valleys their own cadence. Myth reflected this diversity. A story could be pan-Hellenic, known broadly across Greek-speaking lands, or it could belong to one city's pride. Some gods were universal in name but local in form. Sanctuaries had their own customs. Dialects colored the recitation of poems. The world of Greek myth is therefore less like a single map and more like a constellation of lamps, each lit in a different house, each contributing to a larger night. It may be pleasant now to pause on one of the simplest and most beautiful images in Greek life, the olive grove. Olive trees are patient trees. They do not hurry. Their branches twist in ways that suggest age and resilience. Their leaves have a silvery underside that catches light softly. In the mythic imagination, they belong to Athena, but they also belong to the real landscape of the Eastern Mediterranean. They fed households, supported trade, and marked the land with a kind of enduring grace. An olive grove in evening light seems almost already mythological. The ground between the trees is quiet. The leaves move gently. The air smells dry and clean. A story about a goddess could easily settle there and remain for centuries. We should also remember that Greek myths survived because later people kept finding them useful. Romans adapted them. Poets in later eras revisited them. Philosophers reflected on them. Painters, sculptors, dramatists, and writers returned to them again and again. The gods changed with each retelling. Sometimes they became symbols. Sometimes they became moral examples. Sometimes they became beautiful figures in art. And sometimes they stayed exactly what they had always been, mysterious companions in the long human effort to make sense of the world. Even now, a person may know only a few names, Zeus, Hera, Athena, Apollo, and still feel the pull of the whole system. The names act like doors. Open one and a whole courtyard of old light appears. It is worth noticing how often Greek myth involves hospitality. Guests are received or badly received. Strangers arrive and reveal their worth. Houses are tested by the treatment of visitors. This reflects a serious cultural value, but it also creates memorable scenes. The house becomes a place of ethical drama. Will the host be generous? Will the guest behave honorably? Will the door open to welcome or to danger? In myth, a cup of wine can mark civilization, while a refusal can signal chaos. It is a quietly useful idea. The way we treat a visitor says much about the world we think we live in. In the myths, this is not abstract. It is immediate and visible at the table. Penelope, waiting through the long absence of Odysseus, offers one of the most enduring pictures of steadfastness. She weaves and unweaves, delaying what others expect, holding her household in a kind of delicate balance. Her intelligence is quiet, not flashy. Her patience is active, not passive. She's one of the great examples of how Greek myth values cleverness in different forms, not only the cleverness of warriors and travelers, but also the practical wisdom of someone preserving a home. In the gentle hours before sleep, Penelope's loom seems almost like a symbol of time itself, threads passing through fingers day by day, not all at once. The ancient stories are also full of transformations that are not entirely dramatic, only gradual. A river becomes sacred. A mountain is named. A child grows into a figure of legend. A city adopts a god. A local custom becomes a wider tradition. Many such changes happen slowly enough to be nearly invisible while they occur. That is true of memory as well. We do not always notice when a story becomes part of us. It enters through repetition, through childhood, through images heard in passing, through a book left open, through a teacher's voice, through a painting seen long ago. Much of mythology lives in this almost unnoticed way. It settles in quietly. The Greek world also loved contests, and the Olympic Games stand as one of the best-known examples. Athletics carried religious and civic meaning. Strength, grace, discipline, and honor were all woven together. Yet even here, the tone was not only competitive. There was also celebration, public gathering, and the experience of watching human bodies perform with skill. Games in a mythic culture are never merely games. They are a way of recognizing excellence, of honoring gods, of measuring effort against effort. The simple image of a runner on a dusty track can feel almost meditative, especially when imagined in sunlight, with the crowd settled, the air still, and the moment just before movement begins. As the evening deepens in our imagination, we can wander a little further through the lesser-known edges of the Greek mythic world. There are sea goddesses and river gods, winds given names, personifications of dawn, sleep, night, and death. Eos, the dawn, rises each morning in many poems with rosy fingers or a gentle brightening of the sky. Selene travels with the moon. Nyx, night herself, has a solemn grandeur. Hypnos, sleep, is a quiet god to meet in this context because he makes a gentle bridge between waking thought and surrender. The Greeks understood the threshold between vigilance and rest as a meaningful place. A person falls asleep. The mind loosens. Dreams arrive. In that moment, the boundary between human and divine, mortal and symbolic, feels very thin indeed. Dreams mattered deeply in ancient Greece. They could be messages, signs, anxieties, or reflections of daily life. They could visit kings, travelers, and ordinary people alike. In myth, a dream might be sent by a god. In life, it might be interpreted by a priest or healer. Again and again, the Greeks saw the mind as a place where the world continued speaking after daylight had gone. That is a beautiful thought to hold quietly. Even now, in modern life, dreams carry fragments of the day and the ancient brain together in a private theater. The old myths knew that the night does not simply erase thought. It changes its clothing. If we drift farther back, before the great classical stories hardened into familiar form, we find traces of older religious practices, earlier Aegean cultures, and the long inheritance of the Bronze Age. The palace world of Mycenaean Crete contributed symbols, settings, and perhaps some of the narrative raw material that later Greek myth transformed. The line between history and legend is often gentle and porous here. A real place can become a tale. A palace can become a labyrinth. A king can become a memory shaped by poetry. That process is not a failure of history. It is one of the ways humans preserve significance. We do not preserve the past only by recording it. We also preserve it by imagining it richly enough that it remains emotionally present. One can picture a scribe in a quiet room, a vessel painted with a scene, a singer reciting by lamplight, a mother telling a child why a certain goddess is honored, a traveler pausing at a sanctuary, a farmer looking toward clouds over a field. All of these are small scenes, but together they make up the atmosphere in which myth survived. Not every story was grand. Many were repeated in modest settings, where people were tired, hungry, curious, or simply in need of something larger than the present hour. That perhaps is why mythology still works so well in a bedtime setting. It does not demand urgency. It offers scale. It lets the mind widen gently while the body grows still. There is also a remarkable amount of humor in Greek myth, often in places readers do not expect it. A god can be embarrassed. A hero can be tricked by a mortal woman. A boast can be punished by irony. A transformation can have a strange, almost comic edge. The gods are not always dignified in a solemn sense, and that makes them more memorable. They are larger than life, but not immune to small absurdities. This may make them more comforting than perfect beings would be. Perfect beings can feel distant. Imperfect divine figures feel strangely near. They reflect a world in which beauty and error live side by side. One could linger on the stories of creation as well, where chaos is not necessarily disorder in the modern sense, but an opening, a gap, a vastness from which forms emerge. Gaia, the earth, arises. Uranus, the sky, becomes part of the great pattern. Titans appear. Generations follow generations. The early Greek cosmogonies are often severe and dramatic, full of conflict between parents and children, sky and earth, old powers and new. Yet even these tales can be approached softly. They speak of scale, of beginning, of foundations deeper than human memory. They suggest that the world itself was once imagined as a family of forces. Earth was alive. Sky was alive. Sea was alive. The imagination did not see matter as mute. This liveliness extended to every corner of the landscape. Mountains were not only mountains. They were places where gods might dwell or appear. Groves could be sacred. Caves could shelter nymphs, oracles, or hidden births. Springs could heal, reveal, or inspire. A place was never just itself. It carried layers of association. This gave travel a special richness. To walk through Greece in antiquity would be to move through a land of remembered presences. Every path had the possibility of story. Every ruin had a prior life. Every shrine had a reason for being there. The physical world and the imagined world leaned softly against one another. And perhaps that is a fitting place to let the thoughts grow even quieter. The old Greek myths and legends are not only about power, conquest, or miracle. They are also about the human wish to live among meaningful things. A sky that can answer. A sea that can hear. A mountain that remembers. A hearth that endures. A thread that holds. A song that preserves. These are small, steady wonders. They ask nothing hurried of us. They simply remain. If you like, you can think of them now as you would think of distant lanterns across water, or carved figures resting in a dim museum room, or painted scenes on old pottery, worn but not lost. The stories still exist in pieces. They still travel slowly. They still settle into the mind with the patience of dust and the grace of moonlight. There is something very old and very restful in that, in the idea that a story can be both ancient and intimate. Not distant, not loud, not demanding, just present, just there, Olympus above, the sea below, fields, houses, forests, and roads in between, gods who listen, heroes who struggle, mortals who remember. And beneath all of it, the soft, lasting rhythm of telling and retelling as constant as breathing. If the world feels heavy, the myths do not remove that weight, but they do arrange it into patterns that can be held. They offer shape to longing and image to time. They make a place where the mind can wander gently without needing to decide anything right away, so we can stay a little longer with the quiet details. The shine of olive oil in a lamp, the cool surface of marble, the sound of sandals on stone, a wreath laid carefully down, a bowl of dark wine catching a reflection, a reed flute somewhere in the distance, the gulls over a harbor at dusk, the pale road up to a sanctuary, the hush before an oracle speaks, the folded thread at a loom, the branches moving above a grave. These are not the whole of ancient Greek myth, of course, but they are part of its atmosphere, and atmosphere is often what remains after the names have gone soft. What remains is a feeling of being accompanied by older minds, older landscapes, older questions. And if you drift away for a while, the stories can continue without you, because they were always made to be heard in pieces, in pauses, in remembered fragments. A god at a crossroads, a hero at sea, a mother at harvest, a poet invoking the muse, a child learning the shape of a name, a city lighting its festival lamps, a traveler pausing at a stone marker, a dream arriving quietly before dawn. All of these belong to the same old world, and yet each can stand alone for a moment, complete in its own small way. The Greeks left us many things, including buildings in ruins, inscriptions cut into stone, fragments of pottery, and texts copied through long centuries. But they also left us a way of imagining the world as layered, inhabited, and almost tenderly alive. That imagination still reaches us, not as a shout, but as a soft echo. It comes through a temple outline against the sky, through a sea breeze, through a painted vase, through a line of poetry, through a story told again at the edge of sleep. So let the ancient names become quieter now. Let Zeus be only a far sky. Let Athena be a steady light near a doorway. Let Hermes become the gentle motion of a road. Let Demeter be the grain in the field. Let Persephone be the seasonal turning. Let Hestia be the warmth at the center of the house. Let Apollo be the clean dawn. Let Artemis be the moon over trees. Let the heroes rest in their stories, and let the stories rest in you without hurry, without pressure, simply as old companions in the dark. And if there is still time, there is always more to notice. More patterns in the myths, more local shrines, more island stories, more names half remembered, more painted scenes on broken pottery, more echoes in the old language, more quiet human gestures hidden inside divine drama. The ancient Greek world was large enough to hold many moods, and gentle enough in the end to keep returning as a place of curiosity and calm. So now, with the room soft around you, imagine a distant shoreline where the water touches the stones again and again, with the same patient motion. Imagine a hill crowned by ruins, pale in moonlight. Imagine an olive tree standing still against the sky. Imagine a story told low and slowly, then allowed to fade. The old world remains, not all at once, not clearly, but in fragments, in light, in remembrance, in the quiet space between waking and sleep. And the myths, like the sea, keep moving very gently, even when everything else is still. Beyond that shoreline, there are still more stories, and they do not come rushing in. They arrive the way distant bells do, or the way a door opens somewhere in another part of a house, or the way a memory settles after a long day. Some of the old Greek tales are bright and famous, with kings and monsters and wars. But some remain quieter, nearly hidden in the folds of time, and perhaps that is part of their charm. They feel less like performances and more like things found by chance, lying between larger events, waiting for a patient listener. There is something calming about the way ancient history still has gaps in it. So much of it is only partly known. A name appears in a poem. A figure is shown on a vase. A shrine is found in a field. A broken inscription keeps only a few letters. A local cult survives in a small valley long after larger stories have faded. The result is not emptiness exactly, but space. space for the imagination to move gently without needing to solve everything. The ancient world does not always answer back in full sentences. Sometimes it offers only a fragment, and that fragment can be enough. In a way, many of the lesser-known gods and heroes live most peacefully in that kind of fragment. There was Pan, for instance, whose presence was felt in wild places, in caves and hillsides, in the sudden hush of a remote grove. He was not always a gentle figure in the old stories, but the places associated with him have a stillness of their own. A shepherd on a slope, a reed bed moving in the wind, a path that disappears into brush, the sound of goats somewhere out of sight. Pan belongs to the outskirts of civilization, where roads grow thin and the land begins to speak in slower ways. There were also nymphs, not quite gods in the grand sense, but somehow inseparable from springs, trees, rivers, and mountain places. They are often difficult to hold in a single image because they are so tied to specific landscapes. One spring may have had its own spirit. One grove may have been thought alive with presence. One cave may have seemed especially listening. This is a very old way of seeing the world, and a quiet one. It gives personality to place without demanding that the place become loud. A stream can be meaningful simply by flowing. A tree can be sacred simply by standing for many generations. A stone can gather stories just by remaining where it is. And then there are the heroes who are not always at the center of the greatest epics. Some are almost local, like old acquaintances of the landscape. There is Bellerophon, for example, associated with impossible horses and high skies, a figure who belongs both to daring and to caution. There is Cadmus, who brought letters and founded a city, tied to the idea that civilization itself can begin with a search. There is Theseus, who moved through Athens as both a founder and a puzzle, part historical memory, part mythic shaping. There is Jason, who led the Argonauts after a kind of shining prize, though the tale is really about longing as much as triumph. There is Atalanta, swift and clear-minded, whose running has the simplicity of motion itself. These heroes are often remembered for the dramatic things around them, but perhaps it is worth noticing the quieter parts, the waiting before a journey, the meal before departure, the strange weather at dawn, small object taken as a token, the decision to trust a road not yet traveled. In many myths, what matters most is not only the great act, but the human pause before it, the breath before the leap, the listening before the answer, the looking outward from a harbor or a hilltop. Some of the most beautiful ancient stories are not about conquest at all, but about recognition. A face seen after a long absence, a home recognized by a scar or a doorway, a mother hearing a child's voice across a field, a companion identified by a sign known only to the two of them. The Greek imagination had room for such tender moments. Even the gods, for all their distance, were often drawn into scenes of noticing. A hand on a shoulder, a glance toward the sea, a name spoken softly. It is easy to remember the thunder of Zeus, but it is just as important to remember the gentle lamp of Hestia, because both belong to the same ancient world. Hestia is one of the quietest figures of all, and perhaps one of the most enduring. She is the hearth, the center, the place where warmth gathers and where a household stays itself. There is nothing flashy about a hearth. It burns steadily. It needs tending. It makes room for return. In many ways, Hestia is the opposite of the wandering hero, and yet the hero's journey is always measured against the idea of home. Without the quiet center, the road has no meaning. Without the room to come back to, the voyage becomes only motion. So it is fitting that one of the oldest divine presences in Greek life is also one of the least theatrical. Athena, too, can be approached more gently than the stories sometimes suggest. She's not only war and strategy, but also skill, craft, measured thought, and the patient intelligence of making things well. In a society that admired weaving, pottery, carpentry, and order, a goddess like Athena would have felt near to daily life. A loom set up in a cool room, a helmet resting by a wall, a plan sketched carefully before action, an owl watching from a branch at dusk. The ancient city of Athens carried her name, but she was never limited to one city alone. She belonged to minds that could combine alertness with restraint. And if Athena represents careful thought, then Hermes represents motion, exchange, and the small crossings that connect one place to another. He is the god of roads and thresholds, of messages and travelers, of those moments when one thing becomes another. There is something very soothing about Hermes as a presence, because he seems to understand transitions. He is at home in passages, a field road between villages, a market where words and goods move together, a doorway half open in the afternoon, a boundary stone beside the path, a dream that brings news from far away. Hermes moves lightly through all of this, as if he knows that not every step needs to be heavy. In old Greek life, the road itself had a kind of dignity. Travel was slower and therefore more noticeable. The shape of the land mattered. Mountains separated communities. Seas linked them. Islands held their own traditions. A journey could take many days and change weather, accent, and expectation along the way. So when the myths describe messengers, wanderers, exiles, or returning heroes, they are also describing a world in which movement was meaningful. It was never just getting from one place to another. It was crossing through different textures of life. That old world was full of islands, and islands often preserve stories in strange, lovely ways. A little place surrounded by water can keep a local god a little longer, a local custom a little differently, a local memory in a sharper form. Some islands were associated with Apollo, whose brightness suited open coastlines and clear skies. Some with Dionysus, whose vines and festivals carried a different mood, more fragrant, more fluid, more dusk-colored. Dionysus is one of the most fascinating of the gods because he can seem both wild and intimate at once. He belongs to wine and theater, to ecstasy and ritual, but also to the ripeness of grapes, the heaviness of late summer, the sweetness that comes after long patience. A vineyard at evening can feel almost Dionysian simply by being full of heat and light and slow transformation. There is a softness in the idea that fruit can become wine through time. That ripeness itself is a kind of waiting. That sweetness is often the result of weather, attention, and age. Many ancient Greek rituals were rooted in such transformations. Grain into bread, grapes into wine, wool into cloth, clay into vessel, wood into ship. These were ordinary acts, but they took on sacred shape because they mirrored larger patterns. The myths never float far from the practical world. They live in the same kitchens, fields, workshops, and harbors as everyone else. Even the great divine conflicts often have an earthy center. Demeter searches for Persephone, and the earth changes with her grief. That story is often told as one of loss and return, but it is also about harvest, seed, storage, and season. It explains why the land grows and rests. It makes winter feel like a pause rather than a disappearance. The story is so old and so simple at heart that it remains moving even when heard many times. A mother misses her child. The world becomes sparse. Then there is a negotiated return, but not complete. A portion of life is spent below the surface, and that hidden part becomes part of the natural order. In that way, the myth is also a meditation on how everything visible has a quiet counterpart beneath it. The Greeks, like many ancient peoples, understood that the visible world was only part of the whole. Below the ground were roots, springs, tombs, and older layers of city and memory. Below the sea were currents and depths that could not be seen from the shore. Above the land were clouds, winds, stars, and the movements of gods imagined in the sky. Between these realms stood humans, who had to make sense of practical life while still feeling the presence of greater patterns. Their myths did not solve the mystery. They made it habitable. There are lesser-known heroes, too, whose stories drift in and out of larger cycles. Orpheus, for example, is often remembered for descending into the underworld, but perhaps his deepest image is quieter than that. He is a singer. He makes such beautiful music that trees are said to move toward him. That is an almost startlingly gentle power. Not force, but attraction. Not domination, but listening. Orpheus suggests that art itself can rearrange the world for a moment. A lyre, a voice, a melody in a still place. The story becomes especially touching because it ends in loss, and yet the music remains. Even when the journey fails, the song stays in the air for a while longer. Musicians in ancient Greece held a special place in the imagination. They were not only entertainers, but carriers of memory. Epic poetry was preserved through performance, and that means the old stories once depended on breath, rhythm, and the human voice. It is worth dwelling on that slowly. Before widespread books, before easy copying, before quiet private reading became common, stories were often heard aloud. A narrator had to keep the line moving, and the audience had to receive it in real time. This made story itself more communal, more breathing, more like a shared room than a private object. The gods of poetry, especially the muses, belong to that atmosphere. The muses are another calming presence, though they can seem elusive because they are associated with inspiration rather than form. They hover around memory, art, song, and the keeping of things worth saying. In a quiet bedtime mood, the muses feel almost like the possibility that thoughts do not have to be arranged all at once. A poem can arrive by stages. A melody can begin before meaning is fully clear. A story can find itself in the telling. The ancient Greeks imagined the muses as reminders that human creativity is never entirely solitary. It listens to what came before. It borrows. It answers. It remembers. This remembering is part of what makes mythology feel so old and yet not finished. The stories change with the tellers. A hero in one city may be emphasized differently in another. A god may have one face in a poem and another in a local cult. A sanctuary may preserve a tradition that a historian barely mentions. A vase painting may show a scene that a written source never names. The ancient world is full of these overlapping records, and their differences are not problems to be solved so much as textures to be held. They suggest that no civilization is perfectly uniform, and that even the same God can be known in several gentle tones. There are also the quiet, often overlooked places of devotion. A roadside shrine. A small votive object left by someone whose name is now lost. A miniature figure in clay. An inscription asking for health, for safe travel, for a child's recovery, for an easy birth, for a good harvest. These are not the grand gestures of empire, but the humble hopes of ordinary lives. They matter deeply because they tell us how people actually lived with their gods. Not only in epic moments, but in requests. Not only in festival processions, but in private worry. A tiny offering can be as moving as a temple because it carries an entire life in miniature. The ancient Greeks also knew the underworld in a way that was both fearful and orderly. Hades is often spoken of as dark, but not necessarily chaotic. There is structure there. Rivers, gates, judges, paths. The dead are not simply gone, they are arranged into a different order of being. That distinction matters. The Greek imagination did not always offer comfort in the modern sense, but it did offer form. Even the destination beneath the earth had rules. And in some stories, heroes like Odysseus or Heracles travel there and return, carrying back the knowledge that boundaries exist, but they can sometimes be crossed. Such journeys are heavy, though, and perhaps it is enough to know that they happened in the stories, while we ourselves remain in the softer part of the evening. Odysseus is one of those heroes who seems never fully to arrive anywhere. He is clever, patient, adaptable, and always in motion across a world of islands, capes, storms, and uncertain welcomes. His story contains many episodes that are already calm in themselves if one listens slowly. A cave, a fire, a name withheld, a ship bound to a strange shore, a hall lit by lamps, a recognition after long wandering. His fame rests on cunning, yes, but also on endurance. He survives because he notices details. He remembers patterns. He knows when to speak and when not to. In that sense, he resembles the best kind of bedtime story figure, not simply heroic in a loud way, but attentive enough to move through darkness. There is something deeply human about ancient Greek heroes, even when they are semi-divine. They are often marked by flaws that feel familiar at a distance. Pride, impatience, curiosity, grief, longing for honor, fear of being forgotten, desire for home. These are not modern inventions. They are old companions. The myths preserve them in heightened form, which is why they still feel near. A great deed is memorable, but so is the hesitation before it. A victory is loud, but a doubt can be very quiet and very lasting. The ancient Greek world itself was not one single place, but a mesh of cities, islands, colonies, rural sanctuaries, and trade routes. That mattered to the shape of its stories. A mountain region would feel different from a coastal one. A mainland city would tell myths differently from an island harbor. Colonists carried their gods and customs with them as they moved across the Mediterranean. So Greek myth became a traveling thing, adjusted to each shoreline. In a sense, it behaved much like the people who told it. It crossed waters. It adapted. It settled in new places without fully losing the old ones. This is perhaps why some forgotten gods and local heroes can feel so intimate. They belong to a specific spring, a certain hill, a particular town wall, a grove outside the city gate, a cave with cool air, a festival route, a harbor lantern. Their scale is smaller, and because it is smaller, it sometimes feels more real. A great god can be overwhelming, but a local spirit can feel companionable. Ancient people did not need every divinity to rule the whole sky. Sometimes it was enough for one presence to guard one place. The old world had room for both vastness and nearness. There were healing gods too, especially Asclepius, whose sanctuaries drew the sick and worried. These places must have had a strange calm. People traveled to sleep near the god, to hope for a dream, to seek a cure or guidance. Healing in the ancient world was never just mechanical. It was ritual, environment, expectation, listening, and chance. A sanctuary of healing would have included water, quiet, temple attendance, offerings, and the patient hope of those who came there. Even now, the idea is soothing. To be cared for by a place, to rest in a space where attention itself is part of medicine. Dreams mattered in many Greek stories, and they often arrive softly, like a second kind of weather. A dream can guide, warn, comfort, or confuse. It can carry a god's message or a mind's own concern. Ancient people did not divide interior life from sacred life as sharply as modern habits sometimes do. A dream might be both personal and cosmic. A remembered face might be a visitation. A recurring image might be a sign. At bedtime, this kind of thinking feels especially near because the boundary between waking thought and dream thought is already tender. The old world knew that tenderness and gave it language. There is also quiet beauty in the objects of ancient Greek life, especially when seen through surviving fragments. A drinking cup with painted figures on it, a woven pattern on a fabric long vanished, a bronze helmet dulled by time, a seal carved with an emblem, a ring bearing a small image, a child's toy in clay, a house floor worn smooth by many steps. These details bring the past close in a way grand history sometimes cannot. They remind us that behind every myth there were people who washed dishes, repaired sandals, sharpened tools, counted grain, and waited for the weather to change. Civilization is made of such repetitions, and myth lived alongside them. It is comforting to think how often the ancients turned those repetitions into ceremony. Seasonal festivals helped mark time. Processions gave shape to communal life. Offerings made gratitude visible. Shared meals reaffirmed bonds. Even mourning had ritual forms that helped grief find a place. The stories of gods and heroes did not float above these acts. They gave them context. A harvest rite might echo Demeter's sorrow and return. A household flame might honor Hestia. A road offering might ask Hermes for safe passage. A wedding might call on Aphrodite, who in the myths is often grand and beautiful, but also linked to ordinary human desire, affection, and continuity. Aphrodite herself can be approached as a quieter deity than she is sometimes made to seem. Beyond the obvious glamour, she belongs to attraction in all its forms, to the pull that makes life continue. The sea from which she is said to have emerged gives her a shimmering, unstable quality. The shoreline at dawn, foam against stone, the first light on water, the gentle trouble of wanting. She is not only romance but connection. In the old Greek imagination, love was never entirely simple, but it was part of the world's order just as much as stone or salt. There are also goddesses and figures tied to transition, childbirth, and the thresholds of life. Eileithyia, for instance, the divine helper in labor, reminds us that ancient myth was not only about battle and voyage, but about the arrival of children into the world. Such a presence would have been deeply practical and deeply sacred. The room where a child is born is already a threshold, full of waiting and concern. The body itself becomes a landscape of passage. Ancient stories did not ignore this. They folded it into the divine shape of things. And then there are the ancient queens, princesses, and women of myth whose stories are often told briefly but carry great emotional weight. Penelope weaving and waiting, Andromache looking toward a future she cannot control, Ariadne abandoned and then remembered in a different way, Helen whose beauty became history's burden, Clytemnestra whose actions are dark with family and fate, Medea brilliant and terrible, moved by love and injury alike. These figures are not peaceful in the simple sense, but they are compelling because they show how intensely the Greeks understood the force of personal consequence. A household can be as dramatic as a battlefield. A marriage can reshape a kingdom. A betrayal can echo for generations. Still, not every story needs to be dramatic to be memorable. Some of the most ancient Greek survivals are humble. A proverb, a ritual phrase, a local saying, a half-remembered custom, a name attached to a field. A spring with a story, a stone said to have fallen from the sky. The people who lived with these things may not have thought of them as myth in the modern sense. They were simply part of the landscape of meaning. Only later do scholars gather them and name them fragments. But fragments are not lesser forms. They are often the way old realities endure. One of the loveliest things about the ancient Greek world is how often it places intelligence in unlikely places. A child, a shepherd, a widow, a servant, a craftsperson, a sailor, a traveler. Wisdom is not reserved only for kings. A trickster can know the road. A girl can solve a problem. An old man can recognize a sign in the stars. A listener can understand a story better than a speaker. This egalitarian thread, though not modern in the social sense, gives the myths a human breadth. The world is full of knowers. The gods themselves often arrive disguised, and that too is a gentle lesson in attention. If one listens to the myths as though they were weather, then many of them become more serene. A storm passes, a calm returns, a ship loses sight of land, an island appears, a decision ripens. A city wall rises, a god withdraws, a feast begins, a mother grieves, a king consults an oracle, a stranger is welcomed. The pattern repeats not because nothing changes, but because change itself has recurring forms. Ancient Greek stories were good at noticing this. They recognized that human beings live inside cycles even when they are trying to move beyond them. There is a special stillness in oracles and prophetic sites, perhaps because they combine uncertainty with ceremony. Delphi, with its famous oracle, was both a center of religious gravity and a place of breath, smoke, stone, and mountain air. The idea of asking a question and receiving an answer that must then be interpreted is deeply human. It respects the fact that knowledge is rarely simple. It also suggests that the future arrives in symbols before it arrives in facts. A message might be brief, yet it can shape a life. The ancient Greeks seem to have understood that the most important guidance is often incomplete. That incompleteness can feel strangely restful. Not every question is answered at once. Not every mystery is solved. Some names remain obscure. Some gods remain local. Some heroes remain only half described. Some rituals remain only partly reconstructed by archaeologists. This is not failure. It is the natural state of deep time. Ancient history is full of broken continuity, but broken continuity can still sing. A fragment of verse can suggest an entire world. A temple foundation can imply a vanished roofline. A painted eye on a vase can seem to watch across centuries. It is enough to make the past feel nearby without becoming intrusive. And if we walk still farther in thought, we might come to the edges of Greek colonization, where cities were founded far from the homeland, along coasts of Italy, Sicily, North Africa, and the Black Sea. Those settlements carried their own local myths and developed new ones. The sea connected them, but it also separated them. A colony might dedicate itself to a god from home while also adapting to foreign landscapes and peoples. This gave the Greek world a layered identity. It was not enclosed. It was maritime, mobile, and open to exchange. In that openness, stories traveled like seeds. Seeds are a fine image for myth because they wait. They hold life in compact form. Demeter knows this, and so do farmers in every age. A seed is small, dark, and patient. It disappears into the soil, then changes. The same could be said of stories. A tale can be carried by one person, then set down in another place, then grow in new conditions. Over time, it may flower differently, but the hidden kernel remains. This is why ancient myths can still feel fertile. They have been buried and returned to again and again. The heroes, too, are like seeds in that sense. Their identities are not always fixed. One region emphasizes one exploit. Another preserves a different ending. A later poet makes them noble, while an earlier version may be rougher. A moral lesson is attached after the fact. A local cult remembers them as protectors. A historical core, if there was one, becomes wrapped in story. The result is a kind of layered personhood that belongs only to myth. No single life could contain all those versions, and yet the named figure can hold them in collective memory. It is also pleasant to remember that the Greeks loved categorizing, but not always in rigid ways. They noticed types and patterns, but their stories remained flexible. A river god could be a son, a father, a source, and a place all at once. A hero could be mortal and divine adjacent. A goddess could be both maiden and mother in different contexts. A festival could honor one deity while quietly echoing another. The world was not simplified for them, and they seem to have liked it that way. Complexity, if given shape, can be reassuring. Ancient Greek religion was not one thing either. It changed over time, from the Bronze Age to the classical city-states, from local cult to imperial influence, from open-air sanctuaries to philosophical reinterpretation. The Olympian gods we know were themselves shaped by long history. Some may carry echoes of older Mediterranean or Near Eastern figures. Some local traditions were absorbed, merged, or renamed. Religion in the ancient world was as dynamic as politics and trade. It moved. It adapted. It inherited. It forgot. It remembered again. That is one reason the term forgotten gods feels especially fitting. What is forgotten in one era may persist in another form elsewhere, waiting to be noticed again. Archaeology has a gentle way of returning such things to view. A figurine under soil, a painted fragment, a burial offering, a temple plan, a fragmentary hymn, a worn sanctuary path, a seal impression, a pot shard with a name. It is almost like listening to a very old voice and catching only every third word, yet somehow understanding the mood. Researchers piece together patterns carefully, but even uncertainty can be beautiful. It reminds us that the past is not dead material waiting to be conquered by knowledge. It is a landscape of traces. One might imagine an afternoon in an ancient Greek town. The sun has lowered a little and shadows are stretching beneath the colonnades. A potter's wheel turns slowly. Someone draws water from a well. A child recites a line from a story, not perfectly, but with pleasure. An older person corrects a name. A merchant folds cloth. A priest tends a small altar. Smoke rises from cooking fires. Somewhere, a dog barks once and then falls quiet. The sea, if near, continues its hidden work. Such a scene would not look like myth on the surface, and yet myth would be present in the rhythm of it. Myth is often just daily life seen with reverence. Perhaps that is the most restful way to understand these old Greek gods, heroes, and legends. Not as distant spectacles, but as forms given to ordinary hopes, fears, and observations. The sky is vast, so Zeus becomes vast. The harvest depends on attention, so Demeter watches the fields. Journeys are dangerous, so Hermes guards the way. Craft is precious, so Athena teaches skill. Home is necessary, so Hestia keeps the center. Beauty is powerful, so Aphrodite glows with it. Change is constant, so Dionysus arrives and departs with season. The myths do not invent the human condition. They shape it into images that can be remembered, and there is comfort in memory itself. A remembered story is like a lamp in another room. You do not need to stare at it. You only need to know it is there. A good myth works in the same way. It stays lit somewhere in the mind, not glaring but steady. It may illuminate a question. It may soften a fear. It may simply keep company with you through the night. Ancient Greece, with all its complexity, remains partly alive because people continue to remember it in these gentle forms. A line of epic, a statue in a museum, a temple ruin on a hill, a star name, a constellation, a word in the language, a story told quietly to oneself. Some legends survive because they answer something hidden in us. The wish to be seen by the gods, the wish to come home, the wish to understand the seasons, the wish to make beauty from hardship, the wish to leave a name behind without needing to be famous. The Greeks gave these wishes faces and journeys and destinies. That may be why they continue to feel intimate. Their gods are not simply supernatural beings, they are weather patterns of meaning. Their heroes are not only brave figures, they are shapes of effort. Their legends are not only entertainment, they are a way of dwelling with uncertainty, so the night can hold them now without strain. The old stories can drift like embers in a bowl, warm but not burning. A harbor light, a moonlit hillside, a field after harvest, a sanctuary stone, a lyre string still vibrating faintly after the hand has stopped, a name inscribed long ago, a cup turned face down on a shelf, a road receding into olive trees, a cave mouth dark with cool air, a procession passing slowly between walls, a ship resting in water that hardly moves. All of it belongs to the same ancient calm. And even now, there are still more fragments to gather if one wished to linger. A lesser river god whose course was mapped into local memory, a village shrine devoted to a healing spirit, a small island legend about a lost sailor, a hero whose only deed was to found a town, a goddess honored by women in the privacy of home, a festival no longer remembered except by a few lines in an old text, a proverb that survived because it was useful, then because it was beautiful. Time preserves strangely. It keeps what is repeated, what is loved, what is carved, what is sung, and sometimes what is merely fortunate enough to be found again. In that way, the ancient Greek world is still not entirely past. It lingers in names and patterns, in the shape of stories, in the habit of wondering whether a place has a spirit, in the way a hero can be both admirable and flawed, in the way a goddess can be both distant and near. It lingers whenever we look at a ruin and imagine the roof that once stood above it. It lingers whenever we hear a myth and recognize a private feeling inside it. It lingers whenever history remains incomplete and yet meaningful. So let the remaining figures settle more softly now. Let the sea god in his deep place be only the pulse of tides. Let Artemis be the hush of a forest at dusk. Let Apollo be the first pale line of morning. Let Hermes be the small motion between one thought and the next. Let Pan be the far hillside. Let Hecate be the crossroads seen from a distance. Let Asclepius be the promise of rest. Let Orpheus be the music that stays after the singer. Let the unnamed nymph be the spring behind the reeds. Let the local hero rest in his town wall and his worn path. Let the old festivals keep their candlelight somewhere beyond the edge of hearing. And if you are already drifting, then let the drift be easy. There is no need to hold every name. There is no need to remember every tale. It is enough to feel the shape of the old world, with its olive groves and harbor stones, its temple shadows and mountain winds, its half-lost gods and quietly enduring heroes. The stories do not ask to be mastered tonight. They ask only to accompany the mind as it grows still. So the room can darken a little more, and the ancient shore can recede into a softer line. The lamps in imagined houses can dim. The waves can continue their patient movement. The stars above the Greek islands can remain where they are, ancient and untroubled, while the myths below them sleep inside their own long memory. And in that gentle depth, all the forgotten gods, heroes, and quiet legends rest together, not vanished, only waiting, like old songs heard through water, still calm, still present, still able to drift with you until sleep comes. And as the night grows quieter, it is easy to imagine that the old world did not end all at once. It thinned, slowly, like a lamp going low in a house after everyone has already gone to bed. One story remained on a hillside. Another stayed with a family in a local ritual. Another survived because a stone was too difficult to reuse, or because a name was carved deeply enough to outlast the hand that made it. The Greek world, like all old worlds, was never one single thing. It was a crowd of small places, each with its own rhythm, each with its own memory, each with its own way of understanding the sky. There were the great, widely known gods whose names have lasted through long centuries, and there were also the quieter presences that lived only in one valley, one harbor, one island, one grove. The Greeks did not always imagine divinity as something far away. A river could be a god because it fed a town and shaped a life. A spring could be sacred because it was cold and clear and never stopped. A cave could matter because people entered it carefully, sensing that the darkness inside was not empty. Even a stone, if marked and honored, could become a place where meaning settled. Some of the oldest divine figures were not always bright and noble in the way later imagination prefers. They were older than neat categories. They belonged to the world before stories were polished into harmony. A local fertility spirit, a rough mountain power, a protective figure of the house, a god whose form was half animal in memory and half human in art. All of these stood close to daily life. The ancient Greeks lived among thresholds. Doorways, riverbanks, crossroads, burial places, wells, harbor edges, and grove paths were all charged with a sense that something unseen might be near. There is something soothing in that thought, that the world was full of boundaries, and that boundaries were not empty. The night air at a crossroads could feel different from the air in a courtyard. The edge of a field could feel different from the center. The entrance to a cave could feel different from the road outside. Ancient people noticed such things carefully. They did not need to explain everything in the same way. They made room for mystery without forcing it to become simple. In a busy modern life, that kind of spacious attention can feel almost like a deep breath. And so, in the old Greek imagination, many gods were not only personalities, but powers that moved through the world in recognizable forms. A god of the hearth was warmth itself, as well as a guardian of the family fire. A sea god was the restless and changeable water, but also the human hope that the water might remain kind. A goddess of wisdom was not only cleverness, but the strange steadiness needed to see clearly in times of confusion. A god of healing was not only medicine, but rest, dream, patience, and the slow return of balance. The divine names gave shape to experience. They helped people notice what was already there. Some legends survive because they are grand. Others survive because they are modest and local and human. A forgotten hero might have only one story. He led a colony across the sea, or he defeated a bandit, or he taught people how to honor a god at a certain mountain spring. Perhaps he was remembered because a town believed it had been founded by him, and the town kept his name as part of its own identity. In the ancient Greek world, a founder was often more than a historical figure. He became a kind of root system, a way for a city to imagine itself connected to an older ground. A city would have its own myths the way a family has stories passed down at the table. Not all of them were dramatic. Some were patient. A local tale might explain why a certain hill was sacred, or why a certain festival was held in a certain season, or why a statue in the marketplace looked a little different from all the others. A story might tell of a god who paused there in disguise, or a heroine who saved the town, or a foreign visitor whose arrival changed the place forever. The telling mattered as much as the event. Over time, memory and custom folded together until it was difficult to say where history ended and reverence began. There is a remarkable gentleness in this mingling of fact and belief. It does not mean ancient people were careless with truth. It means that they understood truth in layers. A place could be historically occupied and still be spiritually alive. A hero might have existed once and then become much larger in memory. A ritual could preserve a practical social function and also a sacred one. The old world did not always split reality into separate rooms. It let meanings overlap like shadows at sunset. Many of the quieter Greek legends concern women, household spaces, and hidden labor. Some are not famous in the way the great epics are famous, but they reveal the texture of lived life. There are goddesses associated with childbirth, marriage, weaving, grain, and protection of the home. There are local heroines who guarded a town, suffered a loss, or received honor after death. There are stories in which women's actions shape the course of a family, a settlement, or a ritual custom, even if later retellings give them less attention than they deserve. Ancient religion was never only public and monumental. It also lived in thresholds, kitchens, storerooms, sleeping rooms, and courtyards where lamps were lit at evening. The home itself could be a sacred arrangement. The hearth, especially, held a deep and steady importance. Fire needed tending, and so did community. Fire was useful, but it was also symbolic in a simple, almost physical way. It gave light. It kept away cold. It turned raw food into cooked food. It made the center of a dwelling visible. In many ancient societies, including the Greek world, the hearth was more than a place to prepare meals. It was a sign of continuity. When people moved, they could carry a sense of the hearth with them, as if the old home fire were traveling in memory. That is a comforting idea on a quiet night, the sense that warmth can be preserved and transferred, even when places change. Then there are the heroes, those often misunderstood figures who stand between human weakness and divine favor. Greek heroes were not always perfect. In fact, they often were not. They were powerful and troubled, admirable and dangerous, capable of great deeds and difficult impulses. This is part of why they remain interesting. They do not sleep easily inside the mind. They behave more like real human lives than polished ideals. Their courage usually has a cost. Their victories usually leave residue. A hero may save a city and still be lonely. He may win fame and still lose peace. He may be honored after death because life itself did not fit him comfortably. Some heroes became attached to specific graves, shrines, and local cults. People visited them not simply as dead men, but as continuing presences, protective and sometimes demanding. A hero could be asked for help with crops, with illness, with journeys, with civic danger. The ancient Greeks, especially in local religious practice, did not always draw a hard line between the living and the honored dead. Memory could become active. A burial place could become a point of contact. The soil of a city might hold its own guardians. There is something deeply human in that desire to keep the worthy dead near. Even now, many people understand remembrance as a kind of presence. The old Greeks gave that intuition public form. They built tombs and shrines, told stories, offered gifts, and returned again. They believed a life could continue as influence, as local blessing, as warning, as example, as name. In a world where so many records are lost, that belief feels almost tender. It says that a person may vanish from ordinary sight and still remain part of a place. If one listens quietly to the myths, one finds many figures who live at the edge of recognition. There is Bellerophon, for example, a hero of ascent and descent, one who rode Pegasus and reached toward a kind of overreaching loneliness. There is Meleager, wrapped in the slow fate of the firebrand that controlled his life. There is Atalanta, swift and hard to match, whose story carries the cool air of the hunt. There is Cadmus, searching and founding, carrying foreignness into a new city. There is Perseus, whose journey holds both divine aid and human courage. There is Jason, who assembled companions and ventured into the uncertain East, returning changed by what he found. Each story has its own weather. Some are bright, some are gray, some feel like dawn over water, some feel like a long road in dust. And then there are the quieter heroines and local figures who do not often receive the same broad fame. In some towns, women were remembered as founders, priestesses, helpers, or preservers of sacred custom. Sometimes a myth preserved the idea that a woman had saved a city by self-sacrifice. Sometimes she had simply ensured continuity, which is not a small thing. Continuity is often the hidden architecture of history. Without it, the grand stories would have no place to stand. The world of ancient Greece was full of islands, and islands are naturally good at preserving small differences. A single shore could keep its own variant of a god or hero, its own festival, its own local memory. A sailor might land somewhere and hear a tale he had never heard before, even if the names felt familiar. In the Aegean especially, waters separated and connected at the same time. One island could be near another and yet full of distinct customs. That geography gave rise to many layered myths, each one shaped by a coastline, a harbor wind, a nearby shrine, a mountain visible in the distance. A forgotten god might have belonged to such a place. Perhaps he was honored with only a few lines in an old inscription, or with a ritual described by a traveler passing through. Perhaps a goddess was known by an epithet that has barely survived, a local name attached to a grove or spring. These small divine traces are precious because they show how human devotion actually works. It is often specific. People do not love abstraction in the same way they love a place they can walk to, a tree they can touch, a stone that has witnessed generations. Even the great Olympian figures often absorbed older local powers, as if the divine landscape had been slowly reorganized over centuries. A pre-existing earth goddess might merge into a later deity. A mountain spirit might become a familiar name under another form. A god who was once rough and pastoral might be placed into a larger, more orderly family of gods. Myths adapt, they make room. They translate old sensations into new stories. That is why the Greek tradition feels so alive. It is not one fixed book. It is a long conversation across time. Archaeology gives this conversation a quiet voice. A fragment of pottery, a painted cup, a votive figurine, a temple foundation, a broken inscription, a child's toy left in a room long collapsed. These are not dramatic on their own, but together they let us hear the faint movement of an older world. The smoke of offerings is gone, yet a sanctuary still appears in the arrangement of stones. The name of a deity may survive on a shard of clay, and that tiny mark can be enough to connect us to an entire ceremonial life. History often returns in pieces no larger than a hand. There is also something restful about the way ancient ruins soften in the mind. A column base under weeds, a few carved blocks in a hillside, a theater bowl open to the sky, a road paved long ago with stones worn smooth by feet. Even where there is little left, the mind can supply some of the missing calm. One imagines the sound of cicadas, the stillness before a performance, the long afternoon light on limestone, the smell of dust and herbs. Ancient places are rarely silent in imagination, but they are often quiet. The quiet is not empty. It is inhabited by time. Some of the most interesting Greek myths are not about conquest, but about transformation. A nymph becomes a spring. A youth becomes a flower. A king becomes an example of the limits of pride. A musician's grief opens a passage to the underworld and then closes again. A seer receives knowledge that is useful only at a cost. A goddess changes shape to help, to conceal, or to teach. Transformation is everywhere in Greek story. It reflects a world in which nature itself was visibly changing all the time. Seed to stalk, child to adult, day to dusk, calm sea to storm, summer to harvest, life to memory. This sense of metamorphosis can be strangely soothing because it suggests that nothing is rigid forever. Yet it also reminds us that change is not always gentle. The old stories often understood this. They saw that beauty could fade, power could turn, and longing could survive even when forms altered. A myth was not always trying to comfort. Sometimes it simply recognized the shape of reality and gave it a story to sit inside. Among the quieter figures of the Greek world are the nymphs, who are almost like punctuation marks in the landscape. They belong to springs, trees, caves, groves, and mountains. They are not the sovereign gods of high Olympus, but they matter because they make places feel alive. If one imagines the ancient countryside at dusk, after the harsh sun has eased, it is not difficult to sense why such beings were believed in. Wind stirs the leaves. Water sounds under stones. A shadow moves at the edge of a path. The mind, made alert by twilight, becomes receptive to presence. Nymphs are the kind of beings one might expect from a landscape that never truly looks empty. Pan, too, belongs to that threshold between visibility and imagination. He is rough and sudden, the god of flocks, wild places, and startled sound. Yet even he can be understood softly, as the voice of the hillside when the wind passes through dry grass and pine. The panic he inspires is not just fear of danger. It is the sudden awareness that one is not alone in a place larger than oneself. That sensation can arrive without warning even in modern life, though we may give it different names. And then there are the muses, who hover not in loudness but in quiet continuity. They are the companions of memory, song, and ordered thought. Their presence suggests that inspiration is not ablaze alone. It is also return, repetition, rhythm, and the patient shaping of words. Ancient poets asked for help not because they lacked feeling, but because feeling needed form. This too is a gentle lesson for sleepless minds. Thoughts can be soothed by pattern. A story can gather scattered attention the way a river gathers small streams. When the Greeks spoke of the underworld, they imagined it in many ways: somber, distant, ordered, and inhabited by memories that no longer breathe. Yet even there, the myths do not always feel bleak in a simple sense. They often carry an awareness that all living things eventually move beyond sight. Heroes descend. Lovers are separated. The dead remain as shades, as names, as warnings, as gifts of remembrance. In a bedtime mood, this can be less frightening than it sounds. It becomes part of the larger rhythm, like evening itself. Day recedes, the body rests, the mind loosens its grip. Even the myths of descent can feel like a preparation for sleep. A gentle legend may survive not because it explains the world completely, but because it gives shape to a feeling that people keep having. Why does one river seem more sacred than another? Why does one hill seem charged with memory? Why does a cave feel like a mouth into older time? Why does a ruined shrine still command reverence? The ancient Greeks did not always need a final answer. They were comfortable, perhaps more than we are, with the notion that some places remain partly knowable and partly beyond explanation. This openness appears again in the figure of Hermes, who moves between worlds. He is the messenger, the guide, the god of crossings and exchange. But Hermes is also the soft intelligence of motion itself. The passing thought, the stolen glimpse, the swift path, the signpost, the small adjustment, the ability to travel lightly. He is almost a bedtime deity in his own way because he belongs to transitions. He helps things change place without breaking apart. He carries words, souls, news, and meanings. He is the calm movement between states. Asleep or waking, people live in transitions all the time. Ancient myths notice this. A child becomes an adult in stages. A city changes allegiance. A ship departs the shore and returns altered. Seasons turn. Harvest arrives. Winter gathers. A king loses control. A prophecy comes true. A stranger becomes a founder. A god appears in disguise. Nothing remains in one form forever. The stories are full of these crossings because life is full of them too. There are also the old oracles, those places where speech itself became uncertain and precious. At Delphi, the famous oracle belonged to Apollo, but the broader Greek world included many other sites of divination, many local practices of listening for guidance. A wind in leaves, a dream after prayer, the movement of birds, the condition of a sacrificed animal, the pattern of lots. These were ways of noticing the world with unusual care. One can see in them not only belief, but discipline. They trained attention. They asked people to slow down and observe. In the stillness of the night, that same kind of attention can be comforting. To notice the sound of your own breathing, the weight of the blanket, the hush in the room, the faint city noise far away, or the distant silence of a rural place. The ancients would have understood that listening is part of dwelling. The world speaks at many volumes, and not all of them are loud. Some legends preserve the memory of far travel, and the Greek world was always in conversation with the wider Mediterranean. Ships carried not just goods, but stories. Ideas moved along coasts and through ports. Gods were compared, merged, renamed, and reimagined. A tale heard in one language might return in another with a different emphasis. A hero from the East might become part of a Greek cycle. A goddess from an island might take on features of a mainland deity. The ancient world was connected by water, and water is excellent at carrying echoes. This exchange is one reason Greek mythology feels both familiar and elusive. It is rooted in specific terrain, but it also absorbs older Near Eastern patterns, local Aegean traditions, and changing social realities. The result is not a single neat system, but a layered inheritance. Even the oldest names sometimes conceal older histories beneath them. Scholars can trace some of these patterns with care, but many remain uncertain. And uncertainty in this context is not a defect. It is part of the beauty. The past does not always wish to be fully solved. A night like this can accommodate that incompleteness. The mind does not need to resolve every origin, identify every fragment, or reconstruct every temple in perfect detail. It is enough to let the fragments rest where they are. A broken column in the moonlight, a god's name in a dusty inscription, a story about a shepherd who encountered a divine presence, a heroic grave under an old tree, a festival remembered only by one phrase. These are not failures of history. They are the way history often comes to us. The oldest myths often took shape in song before they were written. Song is good at preserving what matters and letting the edges blur. It can carry emotion, cadence, and repetition across generations. A singer may not remember every detail exactly, but the shape of the story remains. This is another quiet thought that fits the evening well. We do not always need perfect precision to keep something alive. Repeated care can preserve meaning even when details soften. The Greeks understood hospitality, too, as a moral and often sacred matter. A stranger at the door could be a test, a blessing, or a god in disguise. This is a common thread in many old cultures, but in the Greek world it is especially vivid. The tale of a divine visitor who comes unexpectedly to a humble home carries the sense that ordinary courtesy might open onto the extraordinary. A bowl of water, a place by the fire, a shared meal. Such small gestures were not trivial. They were the substance of civilization. In an ancient landscape of travel, danger, and uncertain roads, welcome mattered deeply. There is a softness in that, too. The most important human acts are often small. A cup offered, a seat made ready, a door opened before dusk, a lamp kept lit. Ancient stories knew this. They wrapped great themes inside modest actions. Gods could enter by way of a meal. Fate could hinge on a pause in speech. A town's future might depend on whether someone was treated kindly. Among the quiet heroes of Greek tradition are also the healers. Asclepius, though well known in broader myth, belongs to a very real network of sacred healing centers that were spread across the Greek world. People came to sleep in temple precincts, hoping for dreams that would guide their recovery. They brought ailments, anxieties, and gratitude. Some left votive models of body parts as offerings. A hand, a leg, an eye, a small carved reminder of the wish to be made whole. This is one of the most tender aspects of the ancient world. The recognition that health is not merely a state, but a blessing one can seek, thank, and remember. Healing sanctuaries were often set in places of natural calm, with trees, springs, and orderly courtyards. The environment itself participated in the cure. Coolness, stillness, ritual, and sleep formed part of the medicine. It is not difficult to understand why. The body calms more readily where the mind feels safe. Even now, the idea of a place designed for rest carries a deep appeal. Another quiet thread in the Greek past is the life of rural labor. Not every legend is about kings or cosmic battles. Some myths circle sowing, reaping, shepherding, and weather. The grain goddess Demeter, though prominent, is tied to the intimate cycle of growth and loss. Her story reflects a landscape where seed must vanish into earth before return is possible. That pattern can seem almost like a bedtime lesson itself. What disappears is not always gone forever. It may be lying quiet beneath the surface, waiting for a season. Fields in the ancient world were lived in with close attention. A farmer watched the sky, the soil, the timing of rain, the behavior of animals, the progress of the moon. The old legends often embed this observational wisdom in divine language. A season has a story. A drought has a cause. A blessing has a place. Even when we read these myths symbolically now, they still carry the tactile sense of a world where weather mattered every day. And the weather in Greek imagination was never merely background. Storms could reflect divine moods, yes, but more than that, they made the air feel inhabited. A sudden wind at sea, a cloud drawing over a mountain, a calm morning after rain. These experiences shaped religious feeling. The gods were not confined to temples. They were encountered in climate, in terrain, in sudden change. The world was alive with readable signs. Some of the most fragile legends are attached to single stones. A boundary stone with an inscription, a marker for a sacred precinct, a memorial slab for a fallen warrior, a dedication placed by a traveler who wished to be remembered. These objects are so quiet that one must lean in to hear them, yet they have remarkable endurance. Language carved into stone resists forgetting. Even when the broader story is lost, the object remains, and with it a little pulse of human intention. Someone was here, someone prayed, someone honored, someone hoped to endure. The same is true of coins, small and practical things that nonetheless preserve images of gods, rulers, animals, and symbols. A coin can travel far from the city that made it. It can outlast the building, the market, the state. In a way, it is a tiny ambassador of memory. When modern hands recover such objects from the earth, there is always a soft surprise. Time has folded, but not completely closed. Greek heroes and gods also survive through art, and art has its own quiet intelligence. A vase painting can condense an entire myth into a few elegant lines. A sculpture can hold a posture that suggests both action and rest. A fresco can preserve a face whose original story is already fading. Ancient artists often worked with restraint. They knew how to let suggestion do the work. A gesture can be enough. A profile, a robe fold, a held object, a gaze. On a bedtime evening, this kind of understatement feels especially fitting. Not everything needs to be explained. Some images are better approached like dreams. Dreams themselves mattered greatly in the Greek world. They could carry messages from gods, reflections of the day, omens, memories of the dead, or the mind's own wandering. Ancient texts record dreams that are practical, symbolic, anxious, absurd, or quietly revelatory. People paid attention to them because sleep was a borderland. The rational and the strange could meet there. Perhaps that is one reason the old Greeks feel so near at moments of drowsiness. They too understood that the border between waking and sleeping can be full of meaning. As the night deepens, one can imagine the old sanctuaries becoming especially still. The pine trees around a temple, the path worn into the earth by pilgrims, the offering tables no longer in use, the scent of resin or damp stone, the small birds settling, the last ray on a column and then no more. Then darkness, not as absence but as a kind of shelter. The gods, if they remain, do so quietly. There are, too, the little-known stories of cursed houses and family lines, where generations repeat suffering until some act breaks the pattern. These myths are often severe, but they are also about recognition. A family notices too late what has been inherited. A city ignores a sign. A king misunderstands justice. A household tries to escape a shadow and discovers the shadow has a name. Such stories may feel distant, yet they remain relevant because they speak of patterns larger than any one person. They ask whether human beings can learn before repetition hardens into destiny. But even in these severe myths, there is often a quiet mercy. The telling itself is a form of warning. A story carried forward may help others avoid the same error. The Greeks, with their long memory for inheritance and consequence, knew that narratives can serve as a soft kind of protection. The old tale remains by the fire while the listeners rest. There is a special stillness in the sea at night. For the Greeks, who lived so close to the water, this stillness must have held many meanings. A harbor is practical and symbolic at once. It is where journeys begin and end. It is where trade arrives, news arrives, strangers arrive. It is where the sea is both welcome and dangerous. Many myths begin with departure from a harbor or return to one. The shore is a threshold, and thresholds invite story. The sea also preserves loss. Wrecks, drowned cargo, swallowed roots, forgotten ports, and half-remembered islands all lie beneath its surface. The Mediterranean has always been a keeper of things. It carries ships and takes them, reveals and conceals. The ancient Greek relationship to the sea was therefore one of respect, not romance alone. Sailors asked for good weather, accurate winds, safe passage, and proper timing. They knew that the water could change mood without warning. This is perhaps why so many Greek stories are about navigation in both literal and moral senses. One must find a way. One must read signs. One must choose between islands, between promises, between risks. The hero at sea is a useful image for the human mind at night, moving through uncertainty with attention, trying to keep a steady course while not controlling the whole ocean. And there were also the forested places, the mountain paths, the hidden valleys where local gods could be felt most strongly. Greece is often imagined as bright and open, but much of it is rugged, layered, and intimate. Hills rise abruptly. Paths wind. Groves can feel enclosed. Caves cool the air. Water appears where stone yields. Such features encourage a sense that the landscape itself is articulate. It has folds, chambers, and passages. It is not all surface. This makes the less famous gods especially interesting. Mountain nymphs, river spirits, shepherd deities, local protectors, and chthonic powers all belong to a world that is porous. They remind us that the ancients did not see nature as a blank setting. They experienced it as inhabited by significance. The trees were not just trees. The spring was not just water. The hill was not just elevation. To live in such a world would be to feel surrounded by quiet presences, most of them benevolent, some difficult, all worthy of attention. The old Greek calendar itself was shaped by this attentiveness. Festivals marked the turning of seasons, civic identity, labor, sacrifice, memory, and gratitude. Some were bright and public, with processions, songs, and shared meals. Others were more restrained, known only to initiates or local participants. A festival might honor a god by reenacting a myth, carrying an image, lighting a fire, or bringing the first fruits of the year. Repetition gave these ceremonies their strength. People returned to them the way one returns to a familiar room at the end of a long day. In that sense, ritual is a kind of rest. Not always in the easy sense, but in the sense of structure. It gives the mind something steady to hold. The ancient Greeks understood rhythm, of speech, of music, of process, of seasons. Their myths often move by recurrence. A return to the underworld, a return of a god, a renewal of fertility, a remembered death, a founding deed reenacted by descendants. This repetitive quality can become soothing when heard as music rather than mere repetition. The story comes around again, and with it a sense that order persists. A few figures from the broader mythic world seem particularly suited to evening thought. Endymion, for instance, the beautiful sleeper, held in a kind of endless rest beneath the moon's attention. Selene, the moon goddess, moving softly over the sky. Sleep itself personified as gentle and necessary. Death's closeness to sleep in ancient thought was not meant to be gruesome, but contemplative. Both are states of release. Both involve surrender to a larger rhythm. In bedtime narration, these figures can drift by like quiet lights on a far waterline. Or consider the story of Echo, whose voice became a lingering repetition in the landscape. It is a sad myth, but also acoustically tender. A sound that repeats because the space around it gives it back. Valleys echo. Caves echo. Empty rooms echo. The world remembers speech in fragments. That is a lovely thought before sleep. Even what we say may remain for a moment in the shape of the place around us. And then there are the old wise women and seers, often shadowy in surviving texts, but important in living tradition. Prophecy, healing, lamentation, song, and memory were not always separate roles. Some women in myth know what is coming and speak it softly. Some are ignored until their warning proves true. Some preserve knowledge that the powerful cannot or will not hear. Their stories suggest that wisdom in the ancient world was not always loud and not always rewarded. The Greeks also cherished comedy, which may sound surprising in a sleepy narration, but comedy itself often comes from a similar deep understanding of human weakness. The masks of theater, whether tragic or comic, reveal how people perform social life. A myth can be serious and playful at once. Gods disguise themselves. Mortals misunderstand. Pride is exposed. Desire is entangled. In the calm of night, one can appreciate how these old stories never treated humanity as grand without also making room for absurdity. The world of the ancient Greeks was, in many ways, a world of visible limits. Walls around a city, borders between polis, fences around fields, the sea between islands, the hill line against the sky. Those limits gave shape to belonging. They also made crossing meaningful. To leave one place for another was to enter a new story. To found a colony was to carry one identity into another landscape. To trade, to migrate, to marry, to serve, to visit an oracle, to fight, to sail, to return. These were all crossings that myth could dramatize with remarkable sensitivity. Maybe that is why the Greeks placed so much importance on names. A name could preserve memory, ancestry, honor, locality, or divine connection. A long-forgotten god may live on simply because his name appeared in a temple inventory or a poet's line. A hero's name may survive even after the story is half lost. A place name may hold a whole buried myth within a few sounds. Names are small vessels. They carry more than we might think. One can imagine a scholar long ago copying an inscription by lamplight, or a traveler listening to a village elder tell a local tale, or an excavator brushing soil from a dedication stone in a quiet field. These acts of recovery are themselves modest and careful. Past is not usually seized all at once. It is gathered, piece by patient hands. And now, as the narration itself grows softer, let the lesser-known gods and heroes settle into a deeper dusk. Let Aklis be the braided river. Let the grove spirits stand among the pines and say nothing. Let the founders of forgotten towns rest beneath their steels. Let the sea nymphs remain where the water meets the rock. Let the local altar keep its ashes. Let the old stone roads continue into olive shade. Let the shrine by the spring hear only the small sound of moving water. Let the healer accept the body's wish for balance. Let the sleeper on the temple floor dream quietly. Let the singer lower the lyre. Let the watcher on the hill turn home. It is easy, in the end, to feel that these myths are not just about ancient Greece. They are about the human habit of making companionship with uncertainty. When the world is too large, people name its powers. When time is too long, people tell stories. When loss is too deep, people build memorials, sing laments, and imagine continuance. When the landscape feels alive, they give it forms of reverence. When sleep approaches, they surrender to the rhythm that has always been there. So let the old Greek gods remain now as subtle presences in the back of the mind, not demanding, only enduring. Let the heroes keep their courage and their sorrow at a calm distance. Let the forgotten legends drift like thin incense through a darkened room. Let each fragment find its place in the quiet. A coin in soil, a verse in memory, a spring in shade, a temple base under grass, a name in an archive, a star over a harbor, a hand on a lamp, a breath becoming slower, a thought loosening, a story fading gently, not into nothing, but into rest. And if there is still one last image to keep before sleep, let it be this: an ancient shoreline at midnight, the sea almost black but not quite, a low temple on the point above it, and in the distance a faint path through cypress and stone, where some forgotten god or hero once received a small offering and then was left in peace. The water continues. The stars continue. The old stories continue in their quiet form. And you, too, may continue now into sleep, held softly by the lingering calm of gods, heroes, and legends that have long since learned how gently to disappear.